People like you belong on the cleaning crew, not the stage. That was the first thing they said to her the moment they saw the faded dress, the worn-out heels, and the quiet gaze of someone they assumed was just a staff member who'd wandered into the wrong room. What they didn't know was that the woman they were about to mock was the one holding the keys to the very mansion they were sitting in. They looked at her with pity, completely unaware that she was the sole heir to a multi-billion-dollar empire, the girl whose parents vanished when she was just 3, who was raised by her grandmother, a night shift janitor, and who had been expelled from every dance class simply because she couldn't afford the fees. But tonight, she wasn't here to ask for approval. She came to reclaim everything. And when the music began, her feet didn't just dance. They told a story of a life pushed to its lowest point, of a spirit that refused to stay buried. And when she stopped, the entire room rose to its feet. Those who once looked down on her now lowered their heads, and the man who had just insulted her stood frozen, unable to say a single word. Think you know who's who in that room? Think again and watch till the end, because once the truth comes to light, you'll never look at anyone the same way again. Take off that crumpled dress and go back to where you came from. We're not hiring janitors here. The insult cracked through the grand hall like a whip across bare skin. The man who said it was Victor Langston, the artistic director of La Royale, a place where even a smudge on a mirror could get staff fired. And the one who bore the brunt of his words was Celestine Vale, a young woman who had just walked into the lobby carrying a faded canvas bag, wearing frayed ballet shoes, her hair tied with an old elastic, and a worn-out dress that clashed with the chandelier's crystal shimmer above her head. A woman in a Dior gown glanced down and snorted. She must be looking for her grandma, probably scrubbing toilets. A young man nearby sighed with mock sympathy. Shame. We're all out of pity passes today. Celestine said nothing. She simply stood tall beneath the scrutinizing gaze of the elite. Not because she hadn't heard worse, but because she'd long grown used to being judged by what she wore, not by what she carried within. But what no one in that room realized was this: the name Langston they so proudly etched across their theater was the very name her family had quietly funded for 3 generations. And this room, the stage they thought would make her a joke, had once belonged to her mother, a woman who vanished under mysterious circumstances, leaving behind a legacy too inconvenient for anyone to acknowledge. And today Celestine wasn't here to beg for a chance. She came to reclaim the stage that had been stolen from her. Wait. Celestine spoke up. Her voice did not tremble, but it was nearly drowned out by the spreading whispers of mockery, sharp and swift like fire catching dry straw. I'm only asking for one chance to prove myself. Victor Langston turned around, the corner of his mouth curling as if someone had just told him a cheap joke. A chance, he repeated with a cold delight. Do you know where you are? This is La Royale, not a dance class at a community center. Around here, we don't value courage that comes with the scent of mildew. Laughter rang out from the front row guests, sharp as knives, stinging like Louboutin heels. A young woman wrapped in fur giggled loudly enough for Celestine to hear. Look at her shoes. I've seen better things, hanging from power lines. A middle-aged man with a silk scarf scoffed. She's probably lost, looking for the soup kitchen. Celestine didn't move. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. But her amber eyes never broke contact with Victor's gaze, and that more than anything made him uncomfortable. What a pity, he said, feigning regret. Today's audition doesn't have a charity slot, but if you really want to entertain the room, the stage is still open. The only problem is, can it withstand torn shoes? Laughter exploded around her. Celestine slowly walked toward the center, each step echoing back to memories of dancing barefoot on cement floors under her grandmother's warm gaze. They thought they were laughing at her, but they were laughing inside a theater that her family once built with money none of them had ever deserved. Celestine stepped onto the stage. No spotlight to guide her. No music to back her, just polished wooden floors beneath the condescending gazes of people who had never known hunger, never tasted loss, never had to rise barefoot on cracked concrete. The sound of her shoes touching the floor echoed bare, solitary, yet proud. All eyes turned toward her. At first, there was curiosity, then doubt. A few reached for their phones, ready to record what they assumed would be a humiliating moment, a weekend-worthy joke in the making. That girl didn't have the face of a trained dancer, nor the poise of high society, and certainly not the glittering, crystal-studded costumes they were used to seeing on the Royal Theatre's stage. She closed her eyes, gently drew in a single slow breath, and when her body began to move, every laugh died. No one spoke another word. Each movement flowed like water. Each spin cut through the air like a blade. Each step carried a wordless language that pierced deeper than sound. Every gesture told the story of a child abandoned by nameless parents, raised in a run-down room by a grandmother who swept floors through endless nights, a child who curled beside an oil lamp in winter cold, holding a pair of ballet shoes sewn and re-sewn by hand. No one laughed anymore. They held their breath, as if afraid a sound would shatter the spell, unraveling before their eyes. Victor Langston stood, frozen lips pressed tight, his eyes flickering, not with control, but with the unease of a man witnessing something far beyond the power he once believed was absolute. Celestine turned one final pirouette on the tips of her toes, then ended with a slow, deliberate bow, her entire body trembling softly with each breath. The room fell silent, like it had been sealed in time. And in that moment, everyone understood. She hadn't come to beg for pity. She came to remind them that arrogance always kneels when faced with true talent. Applause erupted like thunder, shattering the suffocating silence. An explosion from hands that had once worn silk gloves used only to hold champagne glasses or sign million-dollar contracts. The entire room rose to its feet, not out of courtesy, but because they simply couldn't help it. An elderly man in a black tuxedo stepped onto the stage, his eyes glistening, as if he'd just glimpsed his youth again. He bowed to Celestine, his voice trembling as he spoke. "I've watched Baryshnikov, but today I witnessed something far beyond technique. What I saw was soul. I'm a board member of the New York Arts Council. Please grant me the honor of inviting you to perform at next month's gala." A wave of whispers rippled across the ballroom like crashing tides. A sharply dressed businesswoman snapped at her husband. "Why have I never heard the name Celestine before?" A young heir stammered to his mother, "Where did she train, Mom? We should sponsor her entire program." Celestine remained silent, quietly watching the crowd's shifting expressions. Her gaze stopped on Victor Langston. He stood at the back of the room, gripping his wine glass tightly, his stare tangled with confusion, humiliation, and disbelief. Just then, a silver-haired woman in a pale gray suit stepped onto the stage. She handed Celestine a thick envelope and spoke in a calm but authoritative voice. "Miss Celestine, I am the lead organizer of tonight's event, and I've just received confirmation of our honorary benefactor. It is none other than Madame Amélie Vaurien, your mother and the rightful owner of the La Royale building." The room erupted again, gasps and exclamations pouring out. Someone blurted, "Wasn't Amélie Vaurien retired from the business world over 20 years ago?" Another woman choked on her words. "Her daughter is Celestine Victor." Langston's face went pale bloodless. He swallowed his rage and humiliation as he realized the girl he had mocked was the daughter of the very woman who held the ultimate power in the place he thought he ruled. Celestine offered a gentle smile, not one of arrogance, but of calm clarity, the look of someone who had always known exactly who she was, long before the world was forced to see it too. Victor Langston descended the stage steps as if the floor beneath him had lost all gravity. He didn't look at anyone. He didn't smile. The arrogance was gone, replaced only by a desperate attempt to cling to the last shreds of dignity like peeling glue on a reputation crumbling before everyone's eyes. Celestine walked down, in the opposite direction, each step as light as a dancer's, yet with every motion pressing another brick onto the decaying pride of the man who once looked down on her. As they were about to pass each other, Victor opened his mouth as if trying to say something, but Celestine spoke first. "You don't need to apologize to me," she said, "because I never gave you the right to define who I am, and I never needed forgiveness from someone who was never capable of hurting me." The room fell still. Her voice wasn't sharp, wasn't angry, yet it sliced deeper than any retaliation could. He froze, then quietly turned away, walking straight out the main doors under the eyes of hundreds who had just witnessed the rise of someone they once believed invisible. Celestine continued toward the gathering of guests, now waiting for her. Their eyes had changed, no longer curious or condescending, but filled with respect. A young man approached and offered her his business card with both hands. "I'm the creative director of Le Ballet de Paris. We watched tonight's performance via live stream, and if you're willing, I would be honored to offer you the position of principal dancer." Celestine accepted the card, nodded with quiet gratitude, then turned to the silver-haired woman, the event organizer. The woman smiled with pride and said, "Your mother is on the second floor." She didn't want to appear publicly, but she didn't miss a single moment. Celestine looked up toward the balcony and saw the silhouette of a woman gently nodding behind the glass. The shimmering glow of the spotlight seemed to confirm that a chapter had closed, and a new one had begun, one more radiant than any stage Celestine had ever dared to dream of. The heavy wooden door on the second floor opened without a sound. Celestine stepped into a room, adorned with abstract paintings and antique art books. Everything was elegant, yet warm. At the center sat a woman with silver-white hair in a neat chignon, her posture graceful behind a walnut tea table. She looked up, and for a moment time seemed to stop, as a pair of gray eyes, so strikingly similar to Celestine's, met hers. Celestine stood still, saying nothing, just staring at her in silence, until a single question slipped out, one that had weighed on her heart for 30 long years. "Why did you leave me?" Amélie Vaurien lowered her gaze from the teacup, her hand tightening slightly as her voice trembled. "You were never abandoned. You were hidden. For your safety, your father and I were under threat by those who wanted to tear down the Vaurian Empire. We lost control and had to fake our deaths to keep you alive." Her voice caught, but she went on. "Your grandmother was the only one brave enough to raise you openly while I watched from afar, through photographs, school reports, every sleepless night, haunted by the hope that one day I would hold my daughter again." Celestine stood frozen, tears spilling not from blame, but from the ache of an understanding that came too late. She stepped forward and for the first time in her life felt the arms of her real mother wrap around her. No more words were needed, just a heartbeat, meeting a heartbeat, two generations torn apart by power and secrecy, finally reunited not by applause, but by the silence of forgiveness and love. 2 weeks after the gala that shook the world, media outlets across Europe and the US were flooded with headlines: Celestine Vorian, the abandoned heiress, returns and redefines. Classical art clips of her legendary performance circulated by the millions, but what truly stunned the public wasn't just her technique, it was the truth. She wasn't a maid, wasn't a lucky poor girl, but the daughter of one of Europe's most powerful female magnates, long thought erased from the financial map. Celestine turned down every commercial talk show and declined multi-million-dollar advance contracts. Instead, she appeared at an official press conference wearing a minimalist black dress, her hair elegantly tied up, and made an announcement no one expected. She would open Académie Vaurienne, a non-profit ballet academy dedicated to nurturing talent from backgrounds often dismissed by society. I've been laughed at for wearing an old dress. I was told to leave the stage because my background didn't fit. Now I want to open that same door for others so they can walk through it without having to change who they are. The press fell silent. Then thunderous applause erupted across the room. Celestine stepped out of the conference hall where Amélie was already waiting. She said nothing, just gave her daughter's hand a firm, quiet squeeze. Celestine no longer needed the Vaurian name to prove her worth. With nothing but her talent and dignity, she had rewritten an entire legacy. On the grand opening day of Vaurian Academy, hundreds of people lined the cobblestone square of old Paris, where a once-forgotten theatre had been restored into a space that blended classical grace with modern soul. Etched in gold, above the stone archway, the inscription stood out against the grey sky, where talent is not judged, but illuminated by belief behind the curtains. Celestine watched the children, bustling about, adjusting their costumes before the Academy's first performance. Among them was Lucia, the little girl who used to practice on a plastic keyboard at the community center, now dressed in a white ballet outfit, her braids neat, her eyes glowing. Madame Amélie sat in the front row, alongside the very artistic directors who once turned Celestine away. Tonight, they were no longer judges, they were spectators looking up. As the lights dimmed, Celestine stepped forward. Not as a dancer, but as a storyteller. I was once called the daughter of a janitor. I was once mocked for not knowing who my parents were, but what they didn't know is that light doesn't need a pedigree to shine. It only needs someone to believe in it. And tonight, I do not perform for them. I perform for those who were dismissed, but never let go of themselves. As the orchestra swelled, Celestine stepped back, leaving the stage to her students. Each child's movement became a wound, slowly healing. Each pirouette became a voice for the forgotten. And when the curtain fell to a storm of applause that would not end, Celestine knew she hadn't just come back. She had carved a new path. She had walked into that ballroom, wearing an old dress, eyes lowered and posture weighed down by judgment. The elite whispered, scoffed, and called her an outsider who didn't know her place. They thought she was merely the daughter of a janitor, someone who didn't belong among gilded ceilings and crystal chandeliers. When the most powerful man in the room demanded she perform for his guests, he believed he was setting the stage for a moment of ridicule, a story he'd later share for laughs. But what he didn't know was that she had once been the principal dancer at Europe's most prestigious ballet academy. And more than that, she was the rightful heir to the very estate they were standing in. When the music began, all laughter died in an instant. Each movement tore through the prejudice they had built. She didn't just reclaim her dignity, she made an entire room bow to the truth. The woman they looked down on was someone they would never rise high enough to reach a grand reversal, quiet, unshaken, yet powerful enough to silence an entire world of privilege. They laughed at her frayed dress. They whispered at the sight of her worn shoes. They looked down on her, thinking she didn't belong. But what they didn't know was that they were standing in her house, attending a party hosted by her family, witnessing something no amount of money could ever buy: the triumphant return of a soul that refused to be broken. The lesson here isn't just about talent, it's about dignity. It's about how someone can endure humiliation, remain silent, and respond with a moment so powerful it makes the entire room rise to its feet. Don't judge someone by what they wear. Don't mistake silence for weakness. And never assume that a person in old clothes can't rewrite the story of an entire generation. If you've ever been underestimated, looked down on, or felt like your dream wasn't pretty enough to be heard, this story was made for you. Hold on to the light in your heart, because one day you too will walk into your own room and make the whole world go silent. If this story moved you, like, share, and leave a comment below with your thoughts. And don't forget to hit subscribe to Toch Story and turn on the notification bell so every week you won't miss a single journey where those once deemed unworthy become the very ones who redefine what truly matters. Toch Story, where we tell the stories that don't just surprise you, but help you believe in yourself again.